All right, howdy. I sorry I didn't have a tech video up for this week. I just college has been an absolute killer, so I went through kind of a list of content ideas that I had, and one of the things that I had on that list was doing a bit of a story time about some of the interviews that I had for some big tech companies a while back. And I figured I'd kind of tell the story. I guess the goal is to kind of give you my experience about what these interviews were like, because if you're watching this channel, hopefully you're also an aspiring engineer wanting to get into tech, or you know, not necessarily an engineer, but someone who's, you know, technically oriented and wants to get into the industry. And you're probably going to have some tech interviews, technical interviews at some point, and you know, kind of knowing what to expect and how to prepare for those would be a benefit to you. So hopefully that's this is gonna be useful. This is not scripted at all. This is just very kind of casual, simple, me just going off of memory, basically. And yeah, I'm just gonna be kind of telling it as I remember it. So this is gonna be the story of when I interviewed at Nvidia. So I think to kind of kick off this story, I really need to go back to my senior year of college. So with my senior year of college, essentially how it worked was I was kind of having a quarter-life crisis, and I didn't know what to do. So I had gotten to my senior year in computer engineering, and I didn't really have anything lined up full-time that I was interested in. So I basically had two options. So I went to school in August, and I had until May. That was going to be my entire senior year. So basically, I kind of came up with the plan of one of two things would happen. I would either take my bachelor's and get an entry-level job in a tech company that by that point, I had decided I wanted to go into semiconductors. I had really kind of narrowed my focus to I wanted to make chips. That's what I wanted to do with my life. But whereas before it was just like something computer hardware related, not necessarily chips, but by the time I was a senior, I wanted to do chips. So I wanted to get into the semiconductor industry at an entry-level position with my bachelor's, or if that did not happen, I would just go get my master's degree in engineering, and then have a better chance to separate myself from the pack and have a better chance of getting a job at one of these companies. So I basically spent my entire year sending out resumes like crazy. I sent them to pretty much every company that even had like a foot in chip design. Any company that, you know, designed chips or even worked with FPGAs in any capacity. Anything that would get me, you know, any kind of experience in working on a chip level. Specifically RTL, which is the area of interest that I have. That stands for Register Transfer Level. Basically, you're looking at how the chip talks in ones and zeros, and how, you know, updating the bus and putting everything into registers, that kind of thing. You know, pretty fundamental stuff. So yeah, I sent out a bunch of resumes, and the first interview I actually got was with Micron. Y'all are probably familiar with Micron. They make DRAM and SSDs with their NAND flash. That was the first one I got, and that one was a little bit more in-depth. I'm going to save that one for another story, because that one was actually pretty cool. And that was in October of, and this is, to be clear, this is 2021 when this is happening. So that was October of 2021. Fast forward a little bit, I get back from, before I get back to 2022 from Christmas break, I get an email, because I had just been spam posting my resume all over. I get an interview from a recruitment official at Nvidia saying that they wanted to schedule an interview with me. And I was very excited for this, because Nvidia was one of my like top 3 companies at the time. You know, I was very interested in pursuing a career with them in ASIC design with their GPUs, that would have been fantastic. So I said, yes, absolutely, let's set the date. I think we set it for like 3 days later or something, and that was that. And I was very excited, very, very excited. But when I read this email, that's when I kind of got the first red flag. So in that email, what they did was, since I applied on their website, they actually sent me a link to the job that I applied for. Now keep in mind, when I was spamming my resume on these websites, I was sending it to basically any position. So like I would go on the Nvidia website, and what I would do is I would filter out every job listing, and basically if the job was technical and it said bachelor's degree, I sent in my resume. And I didn't really read them that much. I probably should have, but basically if it said we'll take you with a bachelor's degree, I applied for it. And it was really just that simple. And that was kind of a mistake, because the job listing that they sent was one for the position was ASIC clock engineer. So I had wanted an ASIC design position where you're actually laying out the chip and, you know, doing the actual like RTL and then the synthesis of it and all of that, actually, you know, designing it. But no, the ASIC clock position is after that chip is already made. As a clock engineer, you would actually spend time tuning that chip to run on the desired frequency. So designing the chip and then tuning it to run on various frequencies, those were two separate teams. At the time, I guess I didn't really realize that those were two separate teams, but looking back on it and looking at the kind of scale that these companies have for like their R&D departments, it makes sense that, you know, designing the chip and then tuning the clock speeds, yeah, it makes a lot of sense that those would be on two separate teams. But at the time I thought that was kind of weird. But the problem was I had no idea how clock speeds worked. I knew what the clock was. I knew that the clock was what everything got updated by. It was kind of the universal signal to update everything. That would update the information on the bus. It would update all of the information in the registers. On the clock, you know, you have your standard like D flip-flops and SR latch, and you know, they have to update on the rising edge of the clock or the falling edge of the clock, depending on, you know, what they are and what you want to accomplish. You know, I'm basically just rehashing all of my entire DCD course, but I knew what the clock was and what it did, but I didn't know anything about, you know, speeds and frequencies and things like that. That's just not something that I covered in my undergraduate degree. So I was a little bit nervous. The one thing I did know how to do is I knew how to make a frequency divider. So basically, if you have if you're generating a clock signal, if you take the output and you tie it back into one of the inputs, you will cut the frequency in half. That's called a frequency divider. So I knew what that was, which is like probably one of the most fundamental things you can know about frequencies in chips. So it's like, you know, it's just someone with a brain cell would know that. So that's not really anything that would put me, you know, in any kind of competitive position in an interview. So basically, I did not know a lot about the position that I was interviewing for, and I kind of just made the mistake of just spamming my resume for anything that had a bachelor's level. There was also something else that I didn't know, which I guess I'll just get to it when we get to the interview. So how this interview worked, the person who initially reached out to me was just someone in their recruiting department. However, a few days later, I was reached out to by an engineer on their team. I believe he was in California, actually. The Santa Clara office, I believe. And what he did was just say, he just confirmed that, you know, we're doing this on this date. And I said, yes, that's fine. And he sent me a link. We just were going to do a little talk over Microsoft Teams. And we were just going to have a little video call. which was fine. So he sent that link, and yeah, I got ready for the interview. I will say, I didn't really realize this much, but you really do, when you're having a technical interview, you need to kind of study up on it. I didn't really do a lot of studying because I didn't really know the depth of the technical questions that they were going to ask. I did kind of like just rehash a little bit of my, like, you know, basic programming. We did VHDL in one of my classes, so I relearned how to, you know, write a basic D flip-flop or multiplexer in VHDL, something like that. That would just be kind of just basic stuff so that I could, you know, when I'm, you know, answering his questions, I know what I'm talking about. But I did not study to the point that I could write 50 lines of code by hand or type out 50 lines of code without referencing any materials. That I didn't study that much. But we get to the day of the interview, and I put on khakis and a button-down shirt, even though we were on Zoom. Even if you have an interview and it's over Zoom or Teams or whatever, be sure to put on like pants and a nice shirt, because I have heard stories of like they will make you like get up and show that you're wearing pants, because there have been people who will just put on like a polo and then they have like jean shorts, or they're just like in boxers or whatever. So be sure to do that, because you never know, they might actually check. But I put on some nice clothes, and my heart was pumping. I was excited and I was nervous because this is a company that I really wanted to get on with and I really wanted to impress. Oh, I should say, it was actually very convenient that before I had this interview, I don't know what the conference was, but Nvidia had unveiled some new features that they were rolling out at, it might have been CES? Is CES in January? I don't know. I forget. I don't know. CES was like, I think it was earlier this year, so I could be misremembering. It was some kind of trade show, and Nvidia announced that they were launching some kind of thing with AI. I don't know. I just looked at the article real briefly, but if you can, a tip for an interview is that if you can kind of talk about like some of the new stuff that company is doing and some of the new stuff they're rolling out, showing them that you're like getting engaged about the projects that company is doing, that's very impressive, and they really they like seeing that. So I did look at that before we interviewed. But the interview came, and you know, we just kind of introduced ourselves. To be for full context, it was just me and this one engineering manager. It was just the two of us. It was not a team of people. It was just him and I. The Micron interview was a little bit different, but we're going to talk about that in another video. But it was just the two of us, and we just kind of started talking about my background, and you know, I told him the story about I knew at 16 years old I wanted to get into tech, and I really wanted to design hardware, and then eventually I settled on designing chips, and you know, it's my passion. I've always been a tech enthusiast, and you know, I've really adapted to the engineering mindset, and yeah, we kind of talked from there. I kind of asked him about, you know, what got him into it, and we had a lot in common, and we kind of went from there. And then we started getting into the technical questions. One of the first things that he asked was if I knew Verilog. And this is something where I got kind of angry at my school because they really did us a disservice. So when we were learning our basic chip design principles, we take this class at Clemson. It's called Digital Computer Design, DCD. And in that class, when you prototype, you actually learn how to design chips, and you prototype things on an FPGA. You write them in VHDL. VHDL is easier than Verilog or System Verilog. The problem is no one in industry uses it. The only companies that I've seen that use VHDL are like a couple defense contractors who work with like FPGAs in some capacity. Every semiconductor manufacturer, your Intel, your AMD, IBM, Nvidia, they all use Verilog or System Verilog. I think most of them are System Verilog by now, actually. But no, I didn't know that in school, and I thought that that was a huge disservice, because if I actually knew some Verilog, that would have been sweet, and that would have been really nice, because it's just kind of a fundamental thing that you need to know. And if I could really kind of, you know, hone in on that and had a whole semester class on it, and actually give them a GitHub link with some Verilog projects that I worked on, that would have been great. But I didn't have any of that, and I really wish that my school taught things in Verilog. They're actually moving that class to teach Verilog now, because the teacher who taught that class with VHDL doesn't teach it anymore. So the new professors are actually switching to Verilog. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I'm glad to see that, because that's going to help some of our students who want to get into chip design. That's going to help them a lot more. But I said no, I did not. I did know VHDL, and I actually wrote out some VHDL code. I think I wrote a multiplexer in VHDL for him to show him that I knew what I was doing, and he's like, that's good, you understand the concepts, and you can probably, it's just a syntax thing, you can probably pick that up, which was good. And then he asked me like a few more technical questions. We started going through just a few technical things. He wanted me to write out some code for him. I think he wanted me to write out, like, you know, manipulating numbers in a 2D matrix, I believe. He wanted me to write some scripts for him in Python. I think he wanted me to write some stuff in C++, which I did not know, but I did write some stuff in C. I don't think I wrote it very well, and I wrote basically what amounted to pseudocode. I don't think he was very impressed by that. And then it kind of came down to talking about clocks, and you know, I was very transparent that it was not my biggest field. You know, what I was really kind of more geared toward was the actual ASIC design. I did talk about how in one of my classes we talked about CMOS level logic, and I showed him how to make an inverter using CMOS logic. An inverter is pretty basic. You have a PMOS and an NMOS. And it's just, you know, it's one of the most simplest, since it only uses 2 gates, it's like the simplest circuit that you can make. I think he wanted me to write like an XOR and a NAND and a NOR all in CMOS logic, which at that point, like, I think I could have done if I had studied up on it a little bit more, but I just was not ready to do it at that point, because I had not gone back. You have to understand, this is like a year after I took this class. So none of this information was fresh. It had been a year since I took that course. So I had to, basically, I should have done my due diligence about studying up on it, but I didn't. And I just was like, no, but, you know, here's an inverter. Even though it's like really simple, you know, I understand conceptually how it works. So, you know, there was that. And then he talked a little bit about frequencies and clock speeds, and I showed him, hey, I can make a frequency divider, and he's like, okay, can you do anything else? I'm like, I'm not familiar with anything else. And he asked me about some different protocols that I just was not familiar with, and, you know, as the interview went on, it really became apparent that I had some really big knowledge gaps in some of the stuff that I think he was expecting. And to be clear, this was a position where they wanted, like, master's degree students. They did take bachelor's, but they really wanted master's degrees. So I was actually kind of surprised that they gave me an interview for this position, because the stuff that they wanted, I'm kind of shocked that they expected a bachelor's to have that kind of knowledge. Because I didn't lie on my resume and say that I knew stuff that I really didn't, so they should have known what I knew. But anyway. It was very clear that there were some gaps in my knowledge when it came to, you know, clock speeds. And then the interview, we kind of concluded, and then one of the things I like to do with interviews is I always ask a lot of questions about the company and about, you know, what does success look like in these roles? You know, what, you know, as an engineer, I want to innovate, I want to, you know, I want to produce something, I want to do work that matters. You know, I want to help us make the best product possible. How can I do that in this role that I'm applying for? And, you know, really kind of, you know, put them in the hot seat, because they like questions that are very engaging. And I talked to him about some of the stuff that I saw Nvidia was doing that they unveiled at this conference, and he was very impressed by all that, which was good. So yeah, that was good. I think I ended it on a high note, and we concluded the interview. And the whole thing lasted about 30 to 45 minutes. It was just kind of a pretty short thing. The way I've heard it from other people, Nvidia will do like several rounds of interviews. The first one is just kind of technical, but like pretty informal, and then they move on to like multi-round interviews with different engineers from different departments, and you got to do all this stuff, and it's like a whole fiasco. But yeah, and then probably pretty unsurprisingly, I came out knowing that that was a pretty rough interview as far as technical interviews were concerned, and I knew that, you know, it's Nvidia, so it was going to be a very competitive place to work, and the position was going to have a lot of people vying for it, because everyone wants to work at these big tech companies. They can afford to get the best engineers in the world. I'm not just competing from the US, I'm competing globally with other engineers for spots at these companies. So I knew that it was definitely going to be an uphill battle to climb. And then I think 3 days later, I got an interview. I think it was actually an automated interview. I don't think a human wrote that email, but basically they just said, you know, thank you for applying, thank you for interviewing. We've decided not to go through with this, and good luck to you in the future. We'll keep you in mind for other positions, which is just a lot of like PR BS, because that is not a thing. So yeah, that's basically how it worked. And I was sad, but I understood. I understood that, you know, I was not the best candidate for that job. It was a position that I was not, with my knowledge and my background and what I learned at college, I was not going to be a good fit for that role. And I should have done better about studying up for stuff. I should have done, you know, a little bit more research into what these positions entail. And I think I was just a little bit too hasty. But, you know, it was definitely a positive experience in terms of learning how these kind of interviews work, and, you know, learning what kinds of questions that they're going to ask, you know. It's not just like, you know, what classes have you taken, what have you learned. You know, you also have to prove that you can program, and they ask a lot of things like, you know, how would you do this in code conceptually? It's not just write me some code in a terminal. It's also, you know, how would you, you know, approach this problem, and explain the code that you would do to accomplish that task. So that's pretty interesting. They really do challenge your brain, which is good, because they need some talented engineers. But yeah, I knew that was definitely going to be an uphill battle. So that was the last technical interview that I had. Like I said, I had one earlier with Micron that was a lot more involved, and I'll make a video about that one later. But that was the last one that I had that I really wanted, and eventually, that was January, so we eventually got to May, and by that point I had been accepted to Clemson's graduate program, and I decided, you know, I'm going to go pursue a master's degree in electrical engineering to hopefully, you know, strengthen my knowledge, strengthen my skill set, and just make myself a better candidate for these jobs. And I can't go into too much detail, but with this master's degree, things have gotten a lot better. So I'm really glad that I went on to get my master's degree instead of just getting a bachelor's and getting out, because I think that this is going to open a lot more doors for me. And my internship this summer, I'm pretty excited about. I can't go into too many details yet, but hopefully I can tell you all about that pretty soon, because a lot of good things are on the horizon, and I might be closer to achieving my dream than I originally thought. But yeah, that's the story. It was pretty short and sweet. I mean, you know, I kind of flunked out on the first round of the interview, so it wasn't really that involved and that detailed. But that was the Nvidia interview that I had, And you know, it was pretty interesting how it was just a one-on-one interview, and it was pretty informal, just over Microsoft Teams. I don't know what I was really expecting, but yeah, that was pretty cool. And getting to talk with someone who was, you know, I think this guy had been there for like 10 plus years or something, and he had a lot of experience, and I think I learned a lot, and I took a lot away from that. So that was pretty cool, and it gives me something to look forward to in the future, and something to aspire to. So yeah, if you have any questions about the interview process, or anything that went on, you know, behind the scenes, or anything like that, please leave them down in the comments below, because I'd love to talk about this more. But yeah, that was the interview process. I'll make another one sometime about the interview that I had with Micron. That one was a lot cooler because I got farther in that one. But yeah, that was the Nvidia interview. If you liked the video, please leave a like and subscribe. I appreciate it. And let me know what you guys think. Have you ever had like a technical interview like that before? Have you ever interviewed at one of these major tech companies? What did that interview look like? How far did you get? What questions did they ask? Let's help each other out here and get each other prepared for these interviews, you know? But yeah, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.